Hi, do you work here?
Sure do.
I got a question about this new brass. I've heard that I've got to fire form this before I start load development. Is that true?
If you don't, you'll be shooting like a stormtrooper.
What the f? Old man Taylor, welcome back to the reloading bench. Got a question today. So what is going on? Well, I've got some brand new brass. I've got some once fired brass. And the question I've got is, I'm going to start some load development. More about that in a minute. Is there going to be a difference? If I shot never fired brass, I went ahead and prepared it and started a load development, would I get a different result than if I had fire formed that brass prior? That's one of those questions as reloaders, we hear the answer to that all the time. But do we know that that's the right answer? Or is that FUD lore? Is that something that's been passed down? Maybe has no impact. Maybe it does. So let's test that today. That's what we're going to do. So I gave a teaser on some load development. Let's talk about that for a minute. So what I'm going to do is I shot some 168s out to 600, and we saw those SMKs tended to open up a little bit more than the distance. The group started getting bigger and bigger the farther I went, which makes me want to develop a round that is designed, more modern design than the 168 Sierra Match King, to go the distance and not have as big of an effect because of the distance. In other words, better BC. That's what we're talking about right here. Bullet shape and design. Sierra, who's been one of, I've been a huge fan of, you've seen a lot of Sierra Match Kings go through this, my reloading press. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some 169 SMKs, significantly higher BC. These are by far a more modern design. I believe these are about 3 or 4 years old. They've only been on the market, not very long. They were designed specifically for this 308 to take it to 1,000 yards and not have the issues that the 168 tended to have, and make it more competitive against what's going on today with bullet design. Still shooting this through 308, so it's not like I'm going to have some magic caliber advantage. I won't. So we're going to compare that the end result with those 168s and just see what happened. Well, while we're at it, that standard that I use using IMR, you've seen me use that in almost every 308 video. That's also dated. So is there a better powder today that will give me more consistency, particularly at that distance? But what does it look like at 100 yards too? Let's see what the difference is. So I'm going to develop some N140. I'm going to compare that with IMR. I'm going to compare that with TAC, the other two powders that we know work very well out there, but aren't perfect. We're going to do that to see if we can drive this 169 modern design SMK and get any change. Well, what are we going to do for the brass? I hate to say it, guys. We're going to do the same thing we've always done. We're going to use the best brass, in my opinion. That is my opinion. So I just don't have brass issues. That's why we go with Lapua. I'm going to go with Lapua again. But I didn't have enough Lapua to continue this and have my 168s loaded up and my factory seconds. So I had to acquire some new 308 Lapua brass. And that brought the question up, should I fire form this before I begin this load development or not? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my brand new Lapua brass. I'm going to neck size this. Now, Lapua brass it's just one of the quality is better. So you don't have to use Lapua, but I hear guys asking questions, should I go through primer pocket, uniforming? Should I deburr the primer hole, flash hole, all those kind of things? I don't do that because I buy Lapua and it doesn't need it. But if I was buying something inferior, less expensive, let's be honest, more economical, there's the word we'll use. Yes, I would go through every step of that. For Lapua, it comes in this box, very well protected. I probably don't even need to do anything with neck tension. And when I say neck tension, I'm talking about interference, how tight the neck is versus the projectile. But I will do that. And one of the reasons I'm going to do that is because I do tend to run the mandrel and I use lube when I do that, and my once fireds will get a little bit of a lubrication in that case neck from the bullet. So apples to apples, I am going to run the Lapua through the mandrel. That's all I'm going to do to it. Run a 0.002 thousandth mandrel to make sure the neck tension and size is the same, and leave that little bit of lubricant on the inside. So it's apples to apples. So what are we going to load? Well, I want to try my new gunpowder, so we're definitely going to be loading 10 shots of the brand new stuff and 10 shots of our once fired with our N140. And we're going to run our new projectiles and get a standard there, get an idea of what to expect. And this may actually be following Hornaday's load development recommendation. We'll talk about that in another video. But that's what I'm going to choose. I'm going to come one grain off of max. I'm going to go back 0.035 on the seating depth, and we're going to load 10 and 10 and see what happens. Well, while we're doing that, might as well, I'm going to load IMR the same way, 1 grain off of max, same bullets, same brass prep, or lack thereof on the new case. And then we'll do it for tack. Exactly the same, 1 grain off of max, same seating depth all the way down the line. And that will let us compare the 3 powders with the same seating depth. Should be very similar velocities. Make sure that's a good, solid, safe load, and get an idea what our SDs look like. What was our rifle like? Which one of those 3 does our rifle like better? And that will steer us towards our load development. Which are we going to choose for our load development? Looking at that SD and extreme spread. But it'll be fun to see what happens at 100 with our group sizing as well. So let's load some bullets and cartridges and take them to the range and see what happens. Got my once fired brass here, primer still in. The only thing I've done is I took my homebrew lanolin alcohol 10-to-1 mix, gave it a couple squirts, shook it. It's a little loud, so I skipped that on the video. I've got to deprime this. I've got to form it. I've got to set this neck tension, and I've got to set my shoulder back. The way I'm going to do that today is using this redding bushing setup. So I'm going to decap in the same step as I'm resizing. So what am I doing with that? The bushing in this die I've got set to be 4 thousandths of an inch smaller than my projectile. That's what the final size of this opening is going to be when I come out of my sizing die. What am I talking about? I'm talking about neck tension, which is really the interference fit or the squeeze, how much smaller this opening is than the projectile. So that tells us how tight we're holding it. Well, through my previous testing, which I did a video on, and yeah, sure, I'll put that up, I found that over squeezing that 4 thousandths smaller than the projectile, and then using a mandrel to open that back up to 2 thousandths smaller than my projectile, gave me the most consistency. So that's what we're going to run today. In the end of that video, we saw the redding beat the RCBS a little bit, but there were a couple flyer shots that may have been wind induced. I said I was going to test that going forward and to get more of a definitive answer. This is part of that. I'm going to go ahead and use that redding setup, and we'll see how well that does through this. And then on to the next project that I have, I may run the RCBS and see how it does. How am I going to set that headspace, as we call it? Well, this is a fire-formed case. It's the exact size of my chamber. So I'm just going to put that with my comparator that gives me a reading in the middle of that angle, somewhere in there, the datum. I'm going to set that in my calipers and then zero my calipers. That's going to give me the size of my chamber. Then I'm going to turn this sizing die down until it pushes that back about 2 thousandths. I'm not going to get particularly hung up on exactly how far. Somewhere between 1 thousandths and 3 thousandths is pretty good as long as it's consistent and it's the same all the way across. All 30 of these cases won't matter. My particular Tikka is not sensitive to that. I could run it at 0.5 and it will chamber just fine. Your rifle may require a bit more, particularly a gas gun. Probably going to go more than that. So that's going to be our setting. When I go to do that, I want to use some force when I get to this final seating, and then I'm going to measure that, and what I want to see, like I said, is in that -1 to -3 range. This one came out just about exact where I want it. So check another one. And here's a hint. I have already set this up for a different project. So it's giving me exactly my 0.2 every time. That's going to be my setting. I'm going to run all 30 cases like that, and then we'll go over to the mandrel. So this back row has been run through the mandrel, and I can see they're darker than the front row, which I have not taken through the mandrel yet. I did not see that difference with the never fired brass. This is the ones fired. That's that case lube holding on to the neck lube. And that may actually cause a difference in the never fired versus the ones fired. With even running the never fired through the mandrel to add the lube, it's not probably going to be the exact same amount. Interesting, just want to point that out. All right, new cases are typically pretty short. I don't expect to trim much here. None at all. But I'm going to run them all through anyway, just in case there's one that's just slightly long enough to need a trim to stay consistent. The other thing I do at this step is take the lube, my case lube, and the neck lube that's on the outside of the case off during this step. So I'm going to go ahead and run through them all. Zero times fired IMR, the second 5-shot string. This is going into target 1, bottom left hand side. Once fired, 169's IMR, shots 1 through 5. These will be at target 1, top right hand corner. shots 1 through 5 of tack, never fired. These are going into the top target, top left bullseye. Never fired tack, shot 6 through 10, top target, bottom left bullseye. Tack, shots 1 through 5 with once fired brass. This is going into the top target, top right hand bullseye. I have adjusted my scope 4 clicks up. N140, never fired brass, bottom target, top left bullseye. No signs of overpressure. .140, shots 1 through 5. One fired brass. Back from the range. I've got targets. I've got data. I've got some surprises. So first thing, let's talk about range day. Range day weather was outstanding. Not a drop of rain. Wind gusting from 1 to 3 occasionally, not even very often. Beautiful day for shooting. So no issues there. All right. Second thing I want to talk about is my actual shooting. So I've heard a lot of comments about your muzzle jumping too much, whatever. You're slapping the trigger. A couple things I want to say about that. One is I always edit my videos very, very tight, so there's not a ton of range time. I'm there for 3.5 hours to get off these 60 shots. So, there's a lot of time in between each shot. There's a lot of time between each 5-shot string to let things cool down. I don't want to bore you with all that. So yeah, I'm cutting to right before I'm pulling the trigger. As far as the muzzle jumping, today I added a little board to the bench to give my bipod something to push against. You'll notice there's a little less jump. I don't think it affected accuracy at all. My results, I actually took some 168s with me and tested all that out. They looked very similar, to what they normally look like. So I don't really think it had anything to do with that. But it did help me see the target a little better. My impacts, I will be running that from now on. It definitely makes better video. It looks great. So let's talk about our targets. Now, I started out thinking load development was done, and all of this was a waste of time. I put 5 shots under 0.3 MOA. That looked pretty dang skippy. And then I shot the second 5. That also kind of points to why 5-shot groups sometimes tell us a story. There was nothing different between those loads. There was nothing different between the way I was shooting them. There was plenty of time in between those shots for my barrel to cool down. There was no heat. I could reach over and touch the barrel. That was just dispersion. I got really lucky with the 5 that put them all right where they were touching. And then the next 5, not so much. And of course, I'll put these composite targets. When you put those 2 groups together, what's that look like? I'll be putting that up here as we go as well. So you can see the 10-shot groups and its status. That's why I did it this way. Remember, this is a 10-shot group, not 2 5s. Now, I did shoot them as 2 5s because I knew there were going to be some where the holes were going to be really hard to see. They were going to start stacking, and they did. So I'm very happy that I did it that way. But that's something to keep in mind about the 5-shot group. It's better than 3 for sure, but it does leave us with a little bit of a story every once in a while. Okay, and this is one of those examples. I shot the never fired brass, had some respectable, near MOA groups with that, near 1 MOA, and I'm really looking for 0.75 MOA or smaller. That's what I'm getting out of my 168s, and I want to beat that. That wasn't fantastic. But then I loaded the one-time fired brass, and I expected to see an improvement there with these 169s. Remember, this is a bullet I've never fired, with gunpowder I've never fired. So I was extrapolating that I'd probably get a little better result. Yeah, no, I shot an inch and 1.5 MOA with once fired. Pretty interesting that group size wise, and there were no flyers. If we look at that, it looks like that guy's a flyer until I shot 2 in there and then put 3 more right down there in that same spot, right? Half of them were there. That's where they wanted to go. So yeah, it was a little disappointing. IMR being one of my better gunpowders in 308, did not like these 169s at all. That's what that told me. And the new brass worked better than the ones fired with that gunpowder and that bullet combination. Fascinating. Then we got onto the tack. Shot the tack, and that was a little more of a mixed bag. It wasn't as definitive as the IMR. The never fired, the group, if I put those two together, I'm in that 1 MOA range. When I did the one-time fired, pretty similar. Their point of aim shifted because I added 4/10 mil up elevation, just because this group was so low. If this one printed any lower, I was afraid, I wasn't gonna get it on paper. I made a scope adjustment there. Their point of aim didn't actually shift. And see, they're really not that dramatically different. When I go to the N140, things did change a little bit. That 0 times fired, never fired, new brass. I shot another spectacular group, just like my very first one, but I'd already shot the other one, so I already knew that wasn't going to be the smallest that was going to get. But if you notice, that does fit very nicely right in the middle of all that, which gives me a very nice 10-shot group, which was not quite at my .75, but it was actually kissing it, right? 0.8 something. And then I did the one-time fired, and things did tighten up. When I overlay those two, I am well under my .75, so I was real happy with that. This one, the one-time fired brass, actually produced a tighter group than the never fired new brass, which the other two did not, which is the big surprise for me. When I look at my group size in MOA, and I compare my new brass to my one-time fired, I see the IMR, the never fired, beat it. When I look at the tack actually beat it also. It's not until we get to the N140 that the one-time fired brass, fire-formed brass, actually beat in group size the never fired. Just found that very surprising. Did not expect that. I don't know why I didn't expect that. After the fact, I started realizing, of course, ammunition manufacturers produce never fired cartridges that perform very well in those outliers, those match grade ammunition. And Lapua is one of their go-to brasses. So those loads are developed intentionally to fit those results. So it makes sense that it can do it. I've never run this test, and it was a significant surprise to me. If we move into mean radius, and once again, that'll be an MOA, mean radius of MOA. I'm looking at 4895, same thing, new brass beat the one-time fired. In tack, they were about a wash. The one-time fired technically beat it by a thousandth. Yeah, they're the same. Then N140 actually did outperform that in the one-time fired, fire-formed brass. We don't look at group size, and we're going by standard deviation. And this is also a very common practice for load development. The first rounds, I don't even care where they hit, right? I'm going to be looking at standard deviation. When I look at that, the new brass, 4895, 10.5 to my fireformed 13, so IMR beat it there. Also, TAC beat it soundly, 11 to 18.5. TAC, the never fired, definitely is better. And once again, it wasn't until I got to the N140 that I saw that flip, and my one-time fired hit 7.9, which is below that, it's that single digit that I was actually looking for this load development. So size-wise, group size, I wanted below 3/4. I got that with the N140, and now I see in standard deviation, I wanted to be in the single digits, and it is 7, it's under 8. Well, how about extreme spread? If I'm an extreme spread guy, IMR, same thing. The new outperformed the one time. The TAC outperformed the new also, and it wasn't until I got to the N140 that it all flipped in the one time fired. So what do we make of this? Couple points. One, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm not saying new brass is more accurate or more precise than one time fired. What I will say is they're not the same. So if I'm going for consistency, which is everything that I'm trying to do as a hand loader, I'm going for consistency. That's telling me that I want to go with what I'm going to use in the future. I'm going to use fireform brass in the future. So I want to do that so that all this lines up. That's my main takeaway. There's not one more inherently precise or more accurate, but there is one that is closer to what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the life of this brass. And so I probably should choose that. How about 5-shot groups? Let's talk about that for a minute, right? So going back to that very first 5-shot group that was so beautiful in IMR, never fired brass. If I look at my IMR page, and I will put this up there too, this is going to be all 4 targets with their individual 5-shot group information on here, so we can look at it. If we were evaluating this as 5-shot groups and not 10-shot groups, would we have come up with the same answer? The N140 is our answer. Would we have come up with that same answer? So if I look at the IMR, I've got 4 of those 5-shot groups. 3 of them are not below my 0.75. So if I shot 5-shot groups and I shot 3 of these 4, I would have ruled it out correctly. If I would have got this one, I wouldn't have ruled it out. Is that the end of the world? Maybe not. Let's talk about that, all right? But if I look at the other 2, my TAC and my N140, it was just the same. It was just as consistent. 5-shot group would have given me the same answer. So of all of these, I got 3 targets with 4 5-shot groups on them. All of them would have given me the exact same answer as the 10-shot group did, except one. Okay. So let's think about that. I spent 30 rounds, if I was doing load development, not comparing brass to brass. I spent 30 rounds to get that answer. If I would have used new brass, I would have had a 50-50 on the IMR that it would have lied to me. If I used the one-time fired, it would have given me the same answer no matter what. But if I took 30 shots to the range to do that, any way I slice that, if I take that IMR and I look at the 4 groups, one of them not being, that's 75% told me IMR wasn't the right one. 25% chance that I would have got the little one that would have ruled it in. That's what 30 shots prevented from happening. What if I would have went to the range with 15 shots and just shot 5-shot groups of these same powders? I had a 75% chance of getting the same answer with half the ammunition. All right, so that's good, but what about that 25%? Is that the end of the world? Well, let's think about it. If I only take 15 shots to the range and I confirm that I want IMR or N140 because it didn't rule either one of them out because I shot that little group instead, if that happened, then my next step is to go back to the range and shoot them again. And I'm going to shoot probably 5 more shots, or 10 would be more appropriate. But either way, if I shoot 5-shot groups, I'm already into it for 15. Now I'm just going back with 5 more. That's only 25 shots, and I got the same answer. Or if I went back and I shot 10, which I would recommend, I would have shot 35 shots and got the same answer instead of 30. Would that work? Yeah, actually it would. Would it cost me a second trip to the range? Yes, it would. If that's a problem, do it the way I just did it. Take 10, load 10, don't shoot 5. But if I'm on a budget and time, big windows in between my range trips, and I'd rather spend the money on something other than ammunition, I might try to pull this off of 15 shots and go back and confirm it on my next trip. I might try that. Now, personally, I'm not. That's why I shot 10. Heck, I took 60. You see where my brain is. I want more information is better. And I really am not comfortable with 10. 10's not 100% guarantee that N140 is going to work. 10 is just telling me N140 is the powder that I want of these 3 powders to work on my load development and see, can I hold that? Does it stay that good? Can I make it even better? Or does it all fall apart when I start shooting more? That's what my 10-shot test told me. 5-shot test would have had a 75% chance of telling me the same thing. And it would have taken me a second trip to the range to rule out if I got unlucky in that 75 to see that. But if a 75% chance that I would have said N140 and there's no other choice, right? So I would have started my load development with that. So there it is. Now, I've got another video coming that's going to use this data. The next video that I'm working on is the load development for this. And what I'm going to do is I followed Hornaday's load development, their first step, in this test. I have that data right now. So according to them, my next step is to just go shoot a larger group of this and confirm it. And if it does confirm, I'm done. Well, that's not going to be my next video. My next video is going to be, OCW. We'll do the ladder test. We'll do some seating, and we'll see, do I get a better result or not than if I just go back to the range and shoot a large group, which I will do of both my finished product following those steps and Hornaday's, and see, are they the same? Or, is Hornaday dead nuts on that and that's all a waste of time and ammunition? For a modern cartridge, that's why I chose the 169. That's one of the reasons. And a powder that works very well with it. Are they onto something, or does it matter? That's going to be the next one. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.